Hello again! We're in the Museum Batteria Vittor Pisani. This is a coastal battery built before the First War conflict for the defense of the city of Venice. After the restoration in 2017, it became Museum of the First World War. This is the third presentation of a series of 5 meetings called The Great War in a Nutshell. Today's presentation is about the pastimes of the soldiers. Beyond the hard life in the trenches, pastimes of the soldiers waiting for the battle. The First World War was meant to be a lightning war, but in a short time it turned into a war of precision. For this reason, one of the symbols of this great war were the trenches. The life of every soldier in the trenches was an incessant alternating of battles and exhausting work to survive and to transform their own shelters in unassailable strongholds. In the letters, diaries, or in other evidences, you can find the frames of mind, emotions and fears of the soldiers. But also, reports where the real everyday life at the front was told. A curious and not very often told subject is how soldiers passed their spare time during their breaks, the long days of deadlock or the never-ending winters. The games distracted the soldiers from the horrors of war, but these pastimes had to be adapted to the narrow spaces of the trenches. Very practiced were the mora, 9-men's morris or nought and crosses, chess, drafts, the classical cards, dominoes, but also those typical games of bourgeois life as the tombola and Game of the Goose. Precisely the Game of the Goose was revisited from a war perspective with the name of Game of the Eagle. The two-headed eagle, centuries-old symbol of the Habsburg monarchy, which seems to defy the white two-headed goose, presumably Italian, at the other side of the game board. The game was published in Milan in 1916 by the Public Assistance Patronacies Committee of Milan, with the aim of raising funds to get to soldiers at the front basic necessities, and at the same time it worked as veiled propaganda instrument. Another singular game was the roulette with the lies. The soldiers drew some boxes on the ground on which they bet money, and then a louse was placed on the playing ground, and when it stopped in one of the boxes a little bit longer, it decreed the winner. The lives of soldiers before the war were normal lives of worker, carpenter, miner, stonecutter, blacksmith, namely an artisan life, particularly skillful in obtaining objects more or less useful from poor or waste material. And even today, in war museums, you can admire a lot of handmade articles created by these artisans in uniform, slighters, engraved casings or wooden boxes, pipes, dishes, costume jewelry, ornaments. Often these objects were created using war remains. Soldiers drew mainly flowers or animals, but also abstract drawings and human figures. Each one found inspiration from his homeland or from the surrounding environment. For many of the soldiers called to arms, it was often the first time far from home, in unknown places, with people who spoke other languages. For this reason, the letters were the only way for the soldiers to maintain a bond with their families and with their previous life. Thanks to the Great War, the mail service knew a never before seen exponential growth. In Italy were sent about 4 billion letters and cards, an incredible number if one thinks that in 1911 the rate of illiteracy was still at 43.1%, data of the Treccani Encyclopedia. Life at the front compelled the soldiers to live constantly with the presence of death, and therefore religion was lived as faith or superstition because it was a comfort to many of them. The presence of military chaplain in the army and the heavy distribution of holy cards and devotional material helped soldiers a lot. Soldiers found in their own chaplain or in the soldier priests a precious confidant, a link between the horror of war and the memories of their own land and family. Before the Great War, smoking cigarettes was not considered a very manly behavior for men and nor suitable for women. With the coming of the First World Conflict, the modern market of cigarettes developed rapidly and the consumption of smoke increased vertiginously. Smoking a cigarette meant to have a break and relax for a while for the soldier. Cigarettes were freely distributed and their narcotic effect was considered useful to fight the loneliness at the front. The soldiers often shared, exchanged, or gave as present a cigarette, and sometimes they used it as a means of corruption to obtain confidential information. Despite the technological development and the use of ever more sophisticated weapons, during the First World War more than 16 million animals were mobilized. It was a real four-legged army employed for various kinds of tasks, as the transport of weapons and ammunitions, but also to clear the trenches from the rats, to find and rescue wounded soldiers, or to get orders and messages to or from the front. The trenches also housed pets abandoned by civilians fleeing and turned by the soldiers into nice mascots, able to keep up the troops' spirits and to make life a little more normal and familiar within such a tragic reality. Behind the front. During the war, the leisure activities institutionalized by the Supreme Command for the soldier were mainly two: alcohol and whorehouses. Starting from September 1915, precise rules were issued for the founding of whorehouses with the aim of containing the spread of venereal diseases like the syphilis among the soldiers. On the other hand, church authorities took position against the founding of these whorehouses, reporting the state of disorder which had also infected the public morality and habits of women. But military commands were not willing to listen to reason. To oppose the situation, new facilities called Casa del Soldato, literally House of the Soldier, were founded. The first one was created by Father Minozzi. These houses were frequented by many soldiers, and the main promoted activity was correspondence. There were writing and reading rooms where literate were helped to write and read letters. Some other activities were developed, as for example, film or theatre shows.